Hi guys, I'm Sophie and we're going to do a little whistle-stop tour of female anatomy and the menstrual cycle. But first off, it's important to say, our periods are so much more than those days that we're bleeding. It's all part of this menstrual cycle that we're going to talk about. But before we do the menstrual cycle stuff, it's important to know a bit of our anatomy and what's actually inside our bodies before we learn what's going on in the menstrual cycle. So we'll start with a little diagram of our reproductive system, which is in all of us. And we start with two ovaries here, and this is where follicles develop. And here there's about 20 follicles in each ovary, and one will mature into an egg. And then this egg travels down these tubes, which are called the fallopian tubes, which lead into the uterus. So these fallopian tubes connect the ovaries to the uterus, which is also called the womb, which is where a baby would develop in pregnancy. And this uterus is lined with the endometrium, which in certain stages of the menstrual cycle becomes much thicker in preparation for pregnancy. And then we'll go further down here to our cervix, which is the entrance to our uterus, and then the vagina, which leads us to the outside world. And it's important to note here that this is the vagina opening. This is where our period blood comes out of, but this is different to where we wee. Wee comes out of a different hole. That's the urethra, and that's different because some people, you do get a few questions. They're worried, if I have a tampon in when I manage my periods, or a tampon or a menstrual cup, can I still go for a wee? And the answer is yes. Different holes. Good to know that. But now we're thinking, keep our anatomy in mind, and then we'll talk about the menstrual cycle. So this is a little diagram of the menstrual cycle, and it's broken down into 4 phases. It starts with menstruation on day 1, which is our period. Then it goes into the follicular phase, then into ovulation, and then into luteal phase. So 4 different phases. And then it just starts all over again in a big cycle. So this is generally, the menstrual cycle lasts 28 to 35 days. Some people it may be a few days less, some people it may be a few days more, but that's quite normal, and everyone's quite individual in that respect. So it starts, the first phase is menstruation, our period, and that tends to be 4 to 7 days of bleeding. But again, some people bleed for a few days less, some a few days more, and that's quite normal. So what's happening in menstruation is this lining of our uterus, the endometrium, which we mentioned before, it has become nice and thick in preparation for a pregnancy. But when pregnancy doesn't occur, this lining, that endometrial lining, falls away and it comes out through our vagina as period blood. And that's a mixture of the uterus lining, of blood, of mucus, different things. And that lasts, around 4 to 7 days. The next stage is the follicular phase. And this is stimulated by a hormone called follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH for short. And that does what it says on the tin, really. This stimulates the ovaries to produce lots of follicles. And it's usually around 20 follicles in each ovary, where usually one or two, will develop into an egg. And this FSH also stimulates another hormone called estrogen, and the estrogen builds up this thick lining of the uterus, which is the endometrium. So the endometrium becomes nice and thick in preparation for a possible pregnancy. So these hormones, FSH and estrogen, these can make us feel quite good. We're usually quite happy and we're quite energetic in this stage. And then these hormones then trigger the next stage, which is ovulation. And this is triggered by another hormone called luteinizing hormone. So what happens here in ovulation is that mature egg that is released from the ovary, and it travels down the fallopian tubes into the uterus. So that's ovulation. And this luteinizing hormone makes you feel really good. You're really energetic, and this is where you're at your peak energy levels in your menstrual cycle. You're feeling very creative, very sociable. So this would be the best time to go out and see your friends or do that project at school that you've been meaning to get around to for ages, because it's when you're going to do your best work and you're feeling good. So these hormones then trigger the next stage, which is the luteal stage. So this is when another hormone comes into play, progesterone. Progesterone comes in and keeps that lining of the uterus, this endometrium that I keep mentioning, it keeps it nice and thick, but it also drops the other levels of the other hormones. And this drop in those hormones, this can make you feel quite sluggish or quite tired. You're a little bit irritable, you're a bit, feel a bit icky, you're a bit moody. And this is, we've got a term for that, it's also called premenstrual syndrome or PMS. And again, it's very normal to be feeling like this, and it's good just to recognise, when you do feel like this, and just to look after yourself a bit more. And because you're feeling a bit low and a bit sluggish, you're kind of craving some energy, which usually means you crave sugar. Like chocolate bars and ice cream, you just want to kind of sit there and eat lots of sugar, which is fine, you can do that too. But also to kind of recognise, maybe I won't, maybe I'll do some baking, maybe I'll do something else that makes me feel a bit better, and just to be aware of that and be kind to yourself during this stage. And then, so this rise in progesterone, thick lining of the endometrium, as I said, but if a pregnancy doesn't happen, progesterone drops, and which causes this thick lining of the endometrium to fall away. And that's menstruation, that's our period. So then that's the cycle back to the beginning, back to menstruation. So it starts all over again in a big cycle. And that, in a very short nutshell, is the menstrual cycle. But important to remember, periods are a really good sign that all your hormones are working properly, and actually it's a sign that you're really healthy. And, it's a good thing, and being on your period, shouldn't stop you doing anything that you want to do. So that's me, and hope you learned something, or maybe just a bit of revision. But anyway, enjoy the rest of Menstrual Hygiene Day.